Before we learn advanced NotebookLM techniques, I want you to understand one fundamental idea. NotebookLM can only be as useful as the research question you give it. Imagine you've uploaded 5 excellent research papers, a government report, 2 educational websites, and a useful YouTube lecture. You now have a powerful source collection. But if you simply type, "What is AI?" you're not really giving NotebookLM a research task. You're giving it a very broad question. Look at what happens when we ask something this broad. Artificial intelligence could mean its history, its technology, its impact on jobs, its effect on education, its ethical problems, its economic consequences, or dozens of other things. The AI has no clear reason to prioritize one direction over another. Now, let's change the question. Instead of asking, "What is AI?" we ask, "According to my sources, what are the 3 biggest ways AI is changing university education?" Suddenly, we have a specific subject, a specific audience, a specific number of findings, and most importantly, a specific research purpose. This gives us our first principle for NotebookLM. Don't just ask a question. Give the AI a research task. Tell it what you're investigating, what material it should use, what you want it to do, and what kind of answer would be useful. A simple formula will help you remember this: task, scope, focus, and output. You don't need complicated technical prompt engineering. You need clear instructions. Let's put this into practice. I'm going back to the notebook we created in the previous lesson, where we collected our PDF, website, YouTube source, Google Doc, and personal notes. This time, we're going to interrogate those sources. I'll begin with a very common beginner prompt. Summarize my sources. This isn't necessarily wrong, but notice how little direction we're giving NotebookLM. NotebookLM can produce a useful summary, but I haven't told it what information matters most to me. If my goal is to understand the effect of AI on university students, this summary may contain information that isn't particularly relevant to my research. Let's diagnose the problem. We know the task is summarization, but we haven't specified the focus, the scope, or the format. So let's improve it. I'm going to tell NotebookLM exactly what I need. Summarize my sources in 7 bullet points, focusing on how AI is affecting university students. Now the task is clearer. I want a summary, I want 7 points, and I want those points focused specifically on university students. Look at the difference. Instead of receiving an unstructured overview, we now have 7 focused areas that we can investigate further. And this is where NotebookLM becomes particularly useful for research. We can take one of these findings and continue investigating, instead of starting a completely new conversation. Suppose NotebookLM tells us that AI is changing university assessment. Don't immediately leave the conversation. That statement should become the starting point for our next question. According to my sources, AI is changing university assessment. Notice that I'm asking
The purpose here isn't to remove the original academic meaning. The purpose is to make the idea easier to understand, so you can return to the original source with a better mental model. We can make the instruction more specific. Explain this to a first-year university student. Now we're telling NotebookLM the level of explanation we need. This matters because the same concept can be explained at different levels. A professor may want technical terminology. A beginner may need definitions and simpler examples. Next, ask for a real-world example based on the sources. This is especially useful when you're studying an abstract concept. For example, instead of simply memorizing the definition of AI-assisted learning, you can connect the idea to an actual university classroom situation. If the idea is still difficult, go one step further. Ask NotebookLM to explain the same concept using an analogy. An analogy gives your brain something familiar to connect with the unfamiliar idea. And that makes NotebookLM useful not only for research, but also for learning. Your next task is simple. Open one of your sources and find one concept you genuinely don't understand. Ask NotebookLM to do 3 things. Explain the concept simply, give you a real-world example, and then give you an analogy. The goal isn't simply to obtain an answer. The goal is to reach understanding. Now we're moving into one of the most valuable research skills, comparing sources. Real research rarely consists of reading one document and accepting everything it says. Researchers compare evidence. Our first question is, what do these 2 sources agree on? This helps us identify common ground. The matching claims are brought together. These areas of agreement may be useful foundations for our research. But agreement isn't enough. Our next question is, where do these sources disagree? Now we can see where the sources present different interpretations, conclusions, or evidence. We can make the comparison even more useful by asking NotebookLM to organize it into a table. We'll compare the main claim, supporting evidence, and conclusion for each source. Now, instead of switching between documents manually, we have a structured overview that we can inspect. But here's where critical thinking becomes important. NotebookLM has identified the disagreement. It has not automatically decided which source is correct. We now need to examine who produced the information, when it was produced, what evidence supports it, and what context may be missing. Let's make this your 3rd practical exercise. Select 2 sources from your notebook that discuss the same topic. First, ask where they agree. Second, ask where they disagree. Third, ask what evidence each source provides. You have now moved from simple summarization to comparative research. Now let's look at one of the most important research habits of all. Never treat a claim as evidence simply because it sounds convincing. Let's ask, what evidence in my sources supports this claim? We're forcing the investigation back toward the sources. A useful research chain looks like this: claim, evidence, source. If you cannot establish that chain, you should be cautious about using the claim. Now we go one step further. We ask, what evidence challenges this claim? This prevents us from building our entire argument around evidence that supports only one side. Good research isn't simply about finding information that agrees with us. It's also about looking for information that complicates or challenges our conclusion. Finally, we can ask which parts of the answer are directly supported by our sources. This gives us a useful mental distinction: information that is supported, information that is unclear, and information that we simply didn't find in our sources. And whenever something is important, go back to the original source and read the surrounding context. Don't rely on a citation without checking what the source actually says. Let's finish today's lesson by building an advanced question chain from one simple research question. First, ask what is happening. Then ask why is happening. Then ask what evidence supports the explanation. Then deliberately search for counter evidence. And finally, ask what information is missing. This is the difference between asking an AI to give you an answer and using AI to conduct a structured investigation. Now is your final practical challenge. Use your NotebookLM project and investigate this question. How is AI changing the methods of education? First, identify the fundamental changes across your sources. Then investigate why those changes